I remember the day I met Sarah like it was yesterday. It was a warm summer afternoon, and I was sitting in a cafe where the sunlight poured in through the large windows. I was going through a rough patch in my life, dealing with a recent job loss. I was just trying to find solace in my favorite cup of coffee when she walked in. She was striking, with her long, flowing hair and those captivating green eyes that seemed to hold secrets of their own. We struck up a conversation, and before I knew it, we were laughing and sharing stories. Sarah was a graphic designer, vibrant and artistic. She had a way of seeing the world that made everything seem more beautiful. I was drawn to her charisma and charm. We fell in love quickly, and within a year we were married. Life felt perfect. We had a modest apartment in the heart of the city, filled with her artwork and my collection of vintage records. But as time passed, the cracks in our seemingly perfect life began to show. I returned to work after a few months of searching, but the job was stressful and I found myself working long hours. The pressure took a toll on our relationship. I wanted to provide for Sarah, to give her everything she desired, but the stress made me distant. In turn, she became increasingly absorbed in her art, often staying out late for gallery openings or dinner with clients. I trusted Sarah implicitly. I thought our bond was strong enough to weather any storm. I never suspected that she could betray me. But over the course of that last year, I began to notice subtle changes. Little things that seemed insignificant at first, the way she would glance at her phone, or how she would smile at her messages, a smile that was not meant for me. I brushed it off as paranoia. After all, we were young and trying to navigate our way through life. It wasn't until I caught the first glimpse of her betrayal that everything came crashing down. One night I returned home earlier than usual, excited to surprise her with takeout from her favorite restaurant. As I unlocked the door, I heard laughter from inside our apartment. The sound was foreign, warm, and inviting, but it wasn't the kind of laughter I had come to cherish. I paused, heart racing, and listened. The laughter was mixed with the sound of soft music playing in the background, our music. It felt like a dagger had been plunged into my gut. I quietly crept to the living room, my mind racing with thoughts of what I might find. What I saw that night would haunt me forever. Sarah was sitting on the couch, her head thrown back in laughter, but it wasn't directed at the television. It was aimed at a man tall, handsome, and way too familiar. They were sharing a bottle of wine, completely absorbed in one another. I felt my heart shatter, each piece slicing through me as I stood there, frozen. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My wife, the woman I loved, was cheating on me. I barely managed to suppress a gasp before slipping out of sight, my heart pounding in my chest. I stumbled back to my car, my mind racing, thoughts swirling around like a tornado. I was lost in a sea of betrayal and heartache. How could she do this to me? I had given her everything. I felt an overwhelming urge for revenge. The thought of a plan started to form in my mind, a way to make her feel the pain she had inflicted on me. I needed to gather my thoughts to understand what I wanted from this moment. I couldn't confront her now, not yet. I drove aimlessly through the city streets, my emotions tangled into a knot. The betrayal stung sharper than any words I could express. I realized this was not just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I wouldn't let her walk away unscathed. As I parked my car near a deserted spot, I took a deep breath, knowing this was just the beginning of something darker. I needed to plan to execute my revenge with precision. I wanted her to feel the pain she had inflicted on me, to understand what it felt like to be betrayed. And so began my descent into a world of intrigue and deceit. I would not be the victim. I would become the architect of my own revenge. The days following my discovery were surreal. I was a man living in a fog, struggling to process the reality that my wife was betraying me. I tried to maintain a facade of normalcy. I went to work, pretended to be the supportive husband, and even engaged in small talk with Sarah as if nothing had happened. But inside, I was a volcano, ready to erupt. I spent hours contemplating what I had witnessed, replaying every moment in my mind. I thought about the man on the couch, how effortless their connection seemed, and how Sarah's laughter rang like music in my ears just weeks prior. I had to know more. Curiosity was a double-edged sword. It drove me deeper into the heart of my own betrayal. The first step was to gather evidence. I needed to confirm my suspicions and see just how deep Sarah's infidelity ran. It wasn't difficult to find her schedule. I had access to her calendar, and over the years, I had learned the patterns of her life. She had a few clients she met regularly, and I wanted to know if any of them were the man I had seen. That afternoon, I sat at my desk, staring at her calendar filled with appointments and meetings. My heart raced as I jotted down every name and time. One stood out. Dinner with Mark, 8 p.m. The Bistro, Mark. I didn't know much about him, but I had heard Sarah mention him before. A client, she said. I now had my target, and I felt a rush of adrenaline course through me. As I waited for the evening to arrive, my mind was a battlefield of emotions. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers and end the torment. But another part, the part that was slowly morphing into something darker, whispered that I should gather more evidence first. I needed to see them together one more time, to witness it with my own eyes. That night, I decided to follow Sarah. It was easy to wait for her to leave, as she was always meticulous about her appearance when heading out for a business meeting. I watched her from my car as she left the apartment, dressed in a stunning black dress that hugged her curves. My heart ached at the sight. She looked beautiful. How could someone so radiant betray me? I tailed her to the bistro, a quaint little restaurant adorned with soft lighting and a buzzing atmosphere. I parked a few blocks away, pretending to be a pedestrian as I cautiously navigated my way to the entrance. I took a deep breath before stepping in, my heart pounding against my ribcage. Inside, the ambience was romantic. Couples leaned in close, whispering sweet nothings while laughter filled the air. I scanned the room, my eyes fixated on Sarah. There she was, seated at a cozy table in the corner, and across from her was Mark, tall, charming, and utterly confident. They looked comfortable together, the kind of comfort that stung deep in my chest. I settled into a booth at the other end of the restaurant, well out of sight. As I watched, I felt a mixture of anger and sorrow wash over me. They shared a bottle of wine, their conversation animated. I couldn't hear their words, but I could see the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke, and how Mark leaned in, attentive and engaged. It was all too much. Throughout their dinner, I watched as they laughed, shared stories, and leaned closer together. I felt the bile rise in my throat, a bitter taste of betrayal. But I couldn't look away. I was transfixed. This was not just about the two of them enjoying a meal together. This was my life unraveling before my eyes, each moment another stitch pulled from the fabric of our marriage. I snapped a few pictures with my phone, my hands slightly trembling. I couldn't believe I was reduced to this, sneaking around, spying on my wife like a jilted lover in a bad movie. But I felt justified. This wasn't just an invasion of privacy. It was me taking back some control over a situation that had spiraled out of my grasp. The evening dragged on, and I watched as they finished their meal, and Mark leaned in closer to whisper something that made Sarah throw her head back in laughter. I could almost hear the mocking echo of her laughter, the same sound that had once filled my heart with joy now weighing heavily on my soul. Finally, they stood to leave, and I quickly ducked my head to avoid being seen. I followed them out, moving stealthily, keeping my distance. They walked closely, side by side, and I felt a surge of rage. I wanted to confront them both right then and there, but I held back, knowing that this wasn't the time for an emotional outburst. They made their way to a parked car, and to my disbelief, Mark leaned in and kissed Sarah. It was a long, lingering kiss, one that seemed to convey everything I had feared and more. Time froze for a moment, and I could feel my heart breaking all over again. The sight of them together was an undeniable confirmation of my worst fears. As they drove off, I stood there in the parking lot, fighting the urge to scream. I felt completely shattered inside, but I also felt the spark of something new igniting in me, a desire for revenge. I had the evidence I needed now, but I needed to take my time. My pain would not be in vain. I would make sure Sarah understood the consequences of her actions. I returned home, feeling a storm brewing within me. I had witnessed the truth, and now it was time to turn that truth into a weapon. I would not just be a victim, I would reclaim my power. After that night, the weight of betrayal hung heavily over me like a dark cloud. I had witnessed Sarah's infidelity with my own eyes, and it was time to transform my heartbreak into something more formidable. I needed a plan, a way to ensure that she felt the sting of my pain. Revenge was not just about retaliation. It was about reclaiming my dignity and restoring the balance that had been thrown off in our relationship. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions of life while my mind churned with ideas. I had the photos from the restaurant, irrefutable evidence of Sarah's disloyalty. But I needed more than just a snapshot to provoke the reaction I wanted. I needed to make her question everything, the love she had for me and the choices she had made. I began to formulate a plan. The first step was to gather more evidence and ensure I was well prepared. I started by following Sarah more closely, observing her routine and the interactions she had with Mark. I realized that she often met him at different cafes or art galleries, ostensibly for work. This gave me ample opportunities to collect more proof, and I took meticulous notes of her schedule. Each day I became more adept at blending into the background. I would sit in a nearby cafe or park, pretending to read a book while I watched her from a distance. I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of her life. The thrill of the pursuit was intoxicating, and I reveled in it. It was empowering to take back control, even if it was in the most twisted of ways. As I gathered more evidence, my plan began to shape itself. I realized I didn't want to confront her directly. I wanted her to understand the full impact of her betrayal without me having to spell it out. I decided that a public revelation would have the most significant effect. Sarah was proud, and I could use that pride against her. I reached out to a friend from college, Jake, who had ties to a popular local magazine. I knew he had connections that could help me expose Sarah's affair in a way that would humiliate her. I framed my request as needing to write an article about infidelity and relationships in modern society, and he was intrigued. Little did he know that my motives were far from innocent. I enlisted Jake's help to set up an interview with Sarah, under the guise of discussing her art and its place in contemporary relationships. I wanted her to feel comfortable to let her guard down, and in turn I would expose her. She would sit there, a shining star in her world, only to have her dark secret laid bare for everyone to see. As I prepared for the day of the interview, I felt a rush of anticipation. I envisioned her face when she realized what was happening, the shock, the betrayal reflected back at her. It was a twisted sense of justice, but I felt empowered knowing I was taking control of my narrative. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the one writing the ending. In the days leading up to the interview, I continued to document every interaction she had with Mark. I was relentless, even following them to a gallery where they were attending an opening night together. I snapped pictures of them mingling, laughing, and looking every bit the couple I had feared they were. With each photo, my resolve grew stronger. I would make sure that Sarah was left with no illusions about the consequences of her actions. On the day of the interview, I arrived at the cafe early, my nerves a jumbled mess of excitement and anxiety. I took a seat at a corner table where I could watch Sarah as she arrived. She entered with a confident stride, her eyes sparkling, completely unaware that her world was about to be turned upside down. Jake arrived a few moments later, and I could see the way Sarah lit up when she spotted him. She leaned in to hug him, the warmth in her expression starkly contrasting the chill in my heart. I felt a surge of anger but quickly pushed it aside. This was all part of the plan. The interview began casually with Jake asking her about her artwork and inspirations. Sarah spoke passionately, her voice animated, her eyes shining. But inside I was a cauldron of simmering emotion, waiting for the right moment. After a while, Jake shifted the conversation towards relationships, artistic partnerships, love, and fidelity. It was the opening I needed. Have you ever experienced infidelity in your relationships? Jake asked, casually steering the conversation into dangerous waters. In that moment, I could see the flicker of uncertainty in Sarah's eyes. She hesitated, and I knew she was weighing her words carefully, trying to maintain her composure. I held my breath, knowing that this was the moment where I could make my presence known. Infidelity is a complex issue. She started slowly, and depending on the circumstances, it can be devastating. That was my cue. I decided to interrupt, stepping forward with a calm demeanor that belied the storm inside me. What do you think about infidelity when you're actively engaging in it, Sarah? The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, her mouth opening slightly as she processed what had just happened. I could see the realization washing over her. Her secret had been exposed, and I was the one holding the cards. Jake looked between us, confusion evident on his face. What do you mean? I continued, my voice steady, that I have evidence of Sarah's infidelity. Pictures, locations, and the man she's been seeing. It's all there, and it's time for the truth to come out. The shock on Sarah's face was priceless. She stammered for words, her confidence crumbling like a house of cards. You can't be serious. She finally managed, her voice trembling. Oh, I'm very serious, I replied, letting a smirk slip through. And the world deserves to know who you really are. The cafe was alive with murmurs, the other patrons glancing over with wide eyes. I had accomplished what I set out to do. I had stripped her of the pretense she had built around her betrayal. For the first time, Sarah was confronted not just with my pain, but with the reality of her actions laid bare before her. The tension in the cafe was almost palpable, a thick fog of disbelief and shock enveloping the room. I could feel the eyes of the patrons on us, their curiosity piqued by the unfolding drama. I had expected this moment to be explosive, but the reality was even more intense than I had imagined. Sarah was caught off guard, and I took a perverse satisfaction in that. "David, please, this isn't the time or place," she exclaimed, her voice strained, desperate to regain control over the situation. I could see the panic rising within her, the color draining from her face as she surveyed the curious onlookers, their attention now fully focused on us. "What's the matter, Sarah?" I asked, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "Are you embarrassed after everything you've done?" Jake, who had been taken aback by the sudden shift, cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "Wait a minute, David. Are you saying Sarah is cheating on you with Mark?" He turned to Sarah, seeking confirmation. The way Sarah shifted in her seat told me everything. She was cornered. "No, that's not what he means," she stammered, her voice shaking as she tried to grasp at the threads of her story. "David is just trying to manipulate the situation." "Manipulate?" I retorted, leaning in closer. "I'm not the one who's been lying and sneaking around. I have the evidence to prove it." I pulled out my phone and displayed the photos I had taken, the intimate moments captured of Sarah and Mark, their laughter frozen in time. I turned my screen toward Jake and watched as his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Wow," he said, taking a step back. "Sarah, is this true?" "It's complicated," she said, her voice faltering. "David and I have been having problems. Problems." I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. "You mean to say that your solution was to cheat? You chose to betray our vows to hurt me, and now you're trying to spin it as complicated." The hurt in my voice was genuine, but I felt empowered. I wanted her to see the damage she had done, how her choices had reverberated through our lives. I wasn't finished. "Let's not forget that this isn't just about you and me anymore. Everyone in this cafe deserves to know the truth. You've painted a lovely picture of your art and your life, all while sneaking around with another man. How does it feel to be exposed?" The murmurs grew louder among the other patrons, and I could see Sarah's face flush with embarrassment. I noticed a few people pulling out their phones, likely to capture this spectacle. The thought of my pain being broadcasted only fueled my determination. This wasn't just revenge, it was cathartic. "David, please," Sarah pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can talk about this later, just let's get out of here." I shook my head. "No, Sarah, you wanted to have your fun without consequences, and now you're going to face the music. You thought you could hide this from me, from everyone, but here we are. Let it be a lesson." Jake stood awkwardly, caught in the middle. "How do you want to handle this, David?" he asked, his voice cautious. "I want her to face the consequences," I said, feeling a surge of adrenaline course through me. "I want the truth to come out. I want people to see the real Sarah, not the facade she's been maintaining." I turned back to Sarah, who was now on the brink of tears. You've hurt me deeply, and I want you to understand what that feels like. David, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. She cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. But it did go this far, didn't it? You made choices, Sarah. Choices that have hurt the person who loved you the most. I could see that her bravado was crumbling, her mask slipping away. The patrons continued to watch, some with expressions of pity, others with curiosity. I thrived on their attention, feeling powerful in my pain, channeling it into a raw, unfiltered display of emotion. Let's take this outside, I suggested, my voice low but firm. I wanted to escalate the situation further to ensure that she understood the gravity of her actions. I didn't want to be the only one hurt. I wanted to see her squirm beneath the weight of her own choices. Sarah nodded, her expression a mix of fear and shame. We stepped outside, the cool air hitting us like a wave as the weight of the cafe's atmosphere lifted slightly. I could see my reflection in the glass doors behind me, a man transformed by betrayal, fueled by the desire for justice. Are you going to tell everyone? She shot back, her voice rising as she regained some of her composure. What good will that do? You'll just make yourself look like a fool. I laughed, the sound dark and unsettling. No, Sarah, you're the fool. You thought you could deceive me, that I wouldn't find out, but here we are. The truth is out, and it's only going to get worse from here. As we stood there, I could feel the power shifting in my favor. I was no longer the broken husband left. Dark. I was the one steering this ship now, and I wouldn't let it sink without taking her down with me. Jake exited shortly after us, his phone in hand, ready to document the unfolding drama. David, are we going to write about this? He asked, excitement lacing his words. Yes, but not just as a story, I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. Let's make sure this goes public. I want everyone to see Sarah's true colors. I want her to face the consequences of her actions. I could see the panic in Sarah's eyes as she pleaded one last time. David, please, we can work through this, I can change. But there was no turning back now. You've already made your choices, and this is the price you'll pay. I'm done with your lies, and now the world will know the truth about you. With that, I turned to Jake and we walked towards his car. I knew that the fallout from this would be severe, but the prospect of exposing Sarah's betrayal felt exhilarating. This was my moment, the moment I would reclaim my power and let her feel the full weight of her actions. In the days that followed the confrontation, a whirlwind of chaos ensued. The story of Sarah's infidelity spread quickly, fueled by social media and the connections Jake had in the local press. I had anticipated that exposing Sarah would lead to some backlash against me, but I didn't care. I was beyond the point of worrying about public opinion. I was on a mission to ensure that she faced the consequences of her betrayal. Every morning I woke to notifications on my phone, messages, comments, and posts from acquaintances, friends, and even strangers. Some supported me, expressing outrage over Sarah's behavior, while others criticized my decision to go public. You should have worked it out privately, they said. You'll regret this later. But there was no turning back. I had finally reclaimed my narrative. Sarah's world began to crumble around her. The humiliation cut deep. She had built her identity on her artistic talent and vibrant personality, but those qualities were now overshadowed by the scandal. I watched as her social media accounts transformed from platforms of celebration to fields of criticism. Art lovers and admirers were now questioning her integrity, wondering how they could support someone who had been unfaithful. Her clients began to back away slowly. One by one, they canceled projects, citing personal reasons. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction wash over me. She had built her empire on trust and loyalty, and now, those very foundations were crumbling beneath her. I had anticipated her reaction, but it was still surprising to see how quickly she spiraled. There were moments when I felt a tinge of remorse, especially when I saw her standing alone at art galleries, her usual crowd of admirers now absent. But any sympathy I felt was quickly overshadowed by the pain she had caused me. I reminded myself that this was her choice, and I had simply given her the opportunity to confront the consequences head-on. Life continued without her in many ways. I found solace in spending time with friends who supported me, their reassurances lifting my spirits. They encouraged me to move on, to find new beginnings. I had been so consumed by Sarah that I had neglected my own needs and desires. Perhaps it was time to focus on myself, but Sarah wasn't done yet. She reached out to me, desperate. To explain, to beg for forgiveness. It was as if she thought she could charm her way back into my life. Each message felt like a stab to the heart, a reminder of everything I had lost. "David, please let's talk," she texted one evening. "I want to apologize, I can change, I miss you." I stared at my phone, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to keep moving forward without looking back. But another part, the part that had once loved her deeply, longed to know how she planned to justify her actions. I relented and agreed to meet, knowing that this encounter could be pivotal. When we met, I found her sitting at the same cafe where our lives had unraveled. She looked different, hollow and tired. The vibrant energy that had once drawn me to her was absent, replaced by an air of defeat. As I sat across from her, I felt a mixture of anger and pity. "David," she began, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant for it to get this far. I let my emotions take control and I lost sight of what really mattered." I couldn't contain my skepticism. "You were the one who made the choice to betray me, Sarah. You had to know the risks involved. You put everything we built together at stake." "I know," she replied, her eyes glistening with tears. "I was selfish. I got caught up in the excitement of something new and forgot about us. But I've realized how much I've lost. I want to make things right." "Make things right?" I scoffed, leaning back in my chair. "You want to make things right after you've shattered my trust. You can't just erase what you did with a heartfelt apology." "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. I've lost everything, my clients, my friends, and now I'm losing you." Her words resonated with a degree of truth. She was facing the consequences of her actions, but that didn't change the fact that I couldn't just forget. "You thought you could have your cake and eat it too, didn't you? You wanted a perfect life with me while indulging in something on the side. That's not how love works." Sarah looked down at her hands, the weight of my words sinking in. I know I messed up. I didn't realize how deeply I loved you until it was too late. Can't we at least try to talk this through? I want to understand why I acted the way I did." I sighed, feeling the weight of her sadness, but I was resolute. "You need to understand that I'm not the one who needs to make things right. You need to do the work on yourself first. I can't be your crutch anymore. You betrayed my trust, and I can't just jump back into this without a second thought." Her eyes filled with tears, and I felt a pang of sympathy. But the memories of her betrayal were too fresh, too raw. She had shattered something sacred between us, and no amount of apologies could mend it instantly. "I know it's going to take time," she said, her voice small. "If you need space, I understand, but please don't close the door completely. I want to prove to you that I can be better." I nodded slowly, unsure of what the future held. "I can't promise anything, Sarah. It's going to take more than just words to fix this. I need time to process everything. Right now, I need to focus on myself." As I left the cafe, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me: anger, sadness, and a newfound clarity. I had taken back my power, and while it was disheartening to see Sarah in such a state, I knew that I had to prioritize my healing. The aftermath of the confrontation had not only exposed Sarah's deceit, but had also revealed my own strength. I could rise from this betrayal, and I would not allow her to manipulate me back into a false sense of normalcy. With every passing day, I grew more determined to heal and move forward. I embraced the support of my friends, sought new opportunities, and explored what it truly meant to take care of myself. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to walk it, no longer as a victim, but as someone who had reclaimed their narrative. The days turned into weeks, and as I focused on my healing, I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been dormant during my time with Sarah. I turned to old hobbies: painting, writing, and playing music, activities that had once brought me joy but had been overshadowed by the weight of our relationship. I started going out with friends more, sharing laughs and experiences that reminded me of the life I had before Sarah. Every so often, I would receive messages from Sarah, each one more pleading than the last. She would write about her attempts to change, to seek therapy, to understand her actions. Part of me wanted to respond, to show some level of compassion, but each time I found myself reflecting on the hurt she caused and the way she had shattered the trust we had built. I had to remind myself that I was not responsible for her healing. That was her journey to navigate. As summer approached, the city transformed. The streets became alive with music and laughter, and I found solace in the warmth of the sun. I had started attending art shows again, not for Sarah, but for myself. I wanted to immerse myself in the world she had once dominated, but now felt like a fresh canvas for my own experiences. I marveled at the creativity surrounding me and felt a sense of empowerment as I navigated galleries filled with vibrant colors and passionate artists. One evening, I attended an art exhibition where local artists showcased their work. As I wandered through the gallery, I felt a sense of freedom. I was no longer tied to the memories of Sarah. I was exploring my own path. It was during this exhibition that I met Lily, an artist with a contagious passion for her craft. We struck up a conversation about art, life, and the emotional journeys that often accompany creativity. Lily was different. She had a refreshing openness about her, and I found myself drawn to her warmth and authenticity. As we talked, I felt a spark of connection that I hadn't experienced in a long time. We exchanged numbers, and it wasn't long before we began meeting up for coffee and sharing our thoughts on art and life. I felt safe with her, able to express the pain of my past without judgment. As the weeks turned into months, my relationship with Lily blossomed. She was patient and understanding, never pushing me to move faster than I was ready. With her, I experienced the beauty of vulnerability without the fear of betrayal looming over me. Together, we explored the city, attended art shows, and shared our dreams and aspirations. Slowly but surely, I began to open my heart again. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to reach out, but I had established firm boundaries. I would respond occasionally, but I made it clear that while I wished her well, I could not return to the relationship we had. I needed to honor my own healing journey, and there was no place for her in it anymore. One day, out of the blue, I received a text from Jake, the friend who had helped expose Sarah's affair. He wanted to catch up over coffee and discuss his latest writing projects. I agreed, curious about how he had been since the fallout. When we met, he filled me in on the impact of the article we had worked on together. Sarah's story had gained traction, but it had also prompted discussions on the complexities of relationships and infidelity. It sparked a lot of conversations, David, Jake said, taking a sip of his coffee. It's crazy how something so personal can resonate with so many people. You turned your pain into a narrative that others could relate to. I nodded, reflecting on that truth. My pain had fueled my decisions, and while it had initially been driven by revenge, it had ultimately led me to reclaim my own story. I was no longer defined by Sarah's betrayal. I was forging my own path. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, noticing the contemplative look on my face. "I mean, after everything that happened." "I am," I replied, a sense of resolve settling over me. "It was tough, but I've learned a lot about myself. I'm moving on, and I feel like I'm finally finding my footing again." "Good to hear," he said, a smile breaking across his face. "You deserve happiness, man. You've come a long way." As we finished our coffees, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had faced the consequences of my choices, and while the journey had been painful, it had also been transformative. The scars left by Sarah's betrayal had shaped me, but they no longer controlled my narrative. A few weeks later, with Lily by my side, I stood in front of a canvas of my own creation, a piece that captured the essence of my journey. It was a combination of dark and light, representing the struggle of reclaiming my identity after betrayal. I dedicated the piece to myself, to the man I had become through the pain, and to the love I was beginning to cultivate with Lily. As I painted, I felt a sense of liberation. I was no longer a victim of my circumstances. I was the author of my own story. I remembered the anger and heartbreak that had once consumed me, but now they served as reminders of my strength and resilience. Life continued to unfold, and while shadows of the past would occasionally linger, I embraced the present. I had learned to navigate the complexities of love and trust, and I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that I could rise from the ashes of betrayal and create a life filled with meaning and joy. In the end, I discovered that revenge had not been the answer, but rather the journey toward self-discovery and healing. I had emerged stronger, ready to embrace the future with an open heart, ready to paint the next chapter of my life. And in that moment, I understood that the best revenge was not about hurting those who had wronged me, but about living well and finding true happiness once again.